Good morning. My name is Iya. I flew into Miami from Shanghai, China, and I graduated at Northeastern in 2013. I'm such a proud Northeastern young global leader and also a community leader by myself. It's my honor to be here and introduce to you our first speaker of the day. As president of the Partnership for Miami, Raul Moas leads a dynamic group of business leaders acting in the civic interest to build a world-class Miami that works for all its residents. Through this organization, he collaborates with grassroots organizations, researchers, policymakers, and philanthropists to develop and implement solutions that improve Miami's affordability, livability, educational systems, and resilience. Prior to joining the Partnership for Miami, Moa served as a senior director of Knight Foundation. In response to a growing number of Miamians seeking to participate in the city's burgeoning tech economy, he directed over $60 million in grant making to accelerate Miami's development as a tech hub. Moas previously worked as a scout for Lightspeed Venture Partners, a global venture capital firm, and was managing director of Miami Angels, Florida's largest angel investor collective. He also served as the executive director of Roots of Hope, and an international non-governmental organization focused on youth empowerment in Cuba. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Raul Moas and Adele Valencia.
Good morning, all. It's good to be here. Not only with a dear friend, collaborator, and Miami native, Adele Valencia, who's going to introduce herself in a moment, but with all of you who've chosen to be here in Miami. I've heard it's not too hard to get a lot of folks from Boston to Miami in February, so you're welcome. But it's really great to see you to talk about things that are much bigger than the weather, things about a city's identity, a city's future, and the role we can all play in that. Adele, I'm going to just make sure that we kind of set context. Can you tell us about yourself, who you are, and kind of your Miami story, how you and your family got to South Florida?
Thank you so much for having us. It fills me with optimism as a Miami kid to be in a room with all of you. My name is Adele Valencia. I'm an attorney and partner at LSN Law. I was formerly a department director at the city of Miami, and prior to that, I served as chief of staff to our first woman county mayor, who you may hear from today, Daniela Levine Cava. You're a friend of mine. I came to Miami in 1987 when I was 4. My parents met in the Peace Corps. My mom was a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe of South Dakota. My mom was Lakota, born and raised on the reservation. And her fiance was killed in 1968 in Vietnam. And she wanted to do something to honor his memory. So she was the youngest of 8 kids, the only one in her family to go to college. And she met my dad, a Berkeley hippie, on the first day of Peace Corps training camp, and they were married for 53 years. They both became academics. They were teachers at Johns Hopkins University, and then they were hired by University of Miami. So it is especially meaningful to me that Northeastern has chosen to expand here as a child of academics.
Awesome. We're going to do a Miami kid conversation here. The idea is just to give you all a sense of how we see the city evolving and where we believe there's immense opportunity for leadership, whether it's from the private sector, civic sector, academia, all these kind of players coming together at a particular moment in time. I'd like to spoke of kind of the confluence of chance, the intersection of chance and trends, and we really do believe that is happening here in Miami just now. Quick question. You just described yourself as like the byproduct of a hippie,
Yes.
And yet you end up in the civic government, you go to law school, government space. Those are very different things, and it reminds me of like a very different Miami as well. Like Miami, the place of paradoxes. So like, how many Miamis have you seen in your time here, and like, what version are we on now?
Well, becoming a square lawyer was my rebellion, short of joining another political party that you can imagine would have scandalized my parents. But I think we've seen a lot of different versions of Miami. In addition to Alberto's great recommendation of The Year of Dangerous Days, if you're curious about Miami, I encourage you to read The Swamp by Michael Grunwald and A Bubble in the Sun. I think those 3 books give a lot of context. When I moved here in 1987, we went to Santa's Enchanted Forest for our first kind of Christmas foray, for those OGs in the room who know what that is. And there was a gang fight that broke out. And that was the Miami that we were living in. The Miami Herald had terrible stories every day about gang violence, and that is not the Miami we live in today. Miami today is remarkable, thriving. Even sort of 20 years ago when I was applying to jobs as a lawyer, the guidance from my law school, which was in Northern California, was don't waste your time applying to jobs in Miami. It's a tertiary market at best. But I'm delighted that so many folks who grew up here and love it have invested and stayed. And I think a lot of the institutions that have been named have built that. And I know that Northeastern will be a part of building it even further. What about you? How many versions have you been through?
I think that tracks, right? Like when I was a kid, it was the Bakery Center,
Yep.
then it was Sunset Place, and now it's whatever's coming next, like 30 towers of luxury condos. And I think the waves of redevelopment are indicative of the city's kind of investment and reinvestment cycle. To Alberto's point and to your point now, like my biggest tell that we're in a different kind of era in Miami was that a lot of my high school friends came back to Miami in the past 5-6 years.
Absolutely.
And that kind of happened at the same time that Citadel announces its headquarters moving here, that Thoma Brava opens up a second headquarter in the city. And so the penalty for having a career, particularly the early years of your career in Miami, has largely evaporated, if not completely. And that changes then the topography, changes the knowledge worker class, it changes the idea class, it changes the startup class. All of a sudden, Miami gets kind of normalized beyond the fetishized kind of tourism, Latin American kind of little Havana thing, right? It's like we can still do we were talking about the gold-plated mastodon fossil that's across the street. We can still do the very bold thing, but Miami has a lot more substance to it today than it did certainly 30, 40 years ago. And I gotta kind of give him credit because he's here and he's a dear friend, but a lot of other leaders, like a lot of that came from folks like y'all who saw something that a lot of other people didn't see and made a long-term bet, unclear of how it would shake out. And so in the arts in particular, there was a lot of people from the private sector in a civic capacity who were investing in collections, in museums, in things that would become museums 20, 30 years down the road, in bringing Art Basel to Miami. Not exactly clear how it would turn out. It wasn't a recipe or a formula from a chemistry class where you knew what the output was going to be, or should be. It was an experiment and it was a directional kind of investment. Hey, we're investing in the arts. A lot of these men and women don't like each other, actually. They deeply despise each other. And yet they were all rowing and investing in the same direction of, hey, we believe that arts and culture are central to a city's identity, are central to a city's kind of intellectual life and economy. And today we've got this incredible, kind of vibrant, uniquely Miami place.
Absolutely.
I think that's happening today with talent, with universities. I think that universities are saying, we don't know exactly how it's going to shake out, but we want to be in a place that's dynamic, that's open to different viewpoints, that's ideologically diverse in addition to being diverse in other ways, and that people want to be in, people want to live in Miami. And so I can't tell you what's going to happen in 10, 15 years. I do know that having Northeastern and a lot of other folks here elevating the caliber of the discourse, elevating the caliber of the idea and the pipeline of talent, that's going to change this place.
I agree, and I think having folks in leadership who grew up here is another sort of sea change. I would respectfully submit that Miami's always had, right, the talent, the interest, and it's just sort of being recognized now. We are the only major American city founded by a woman, Julia Tuttle. We have two really dynamic and important Native American tribes here, the Miccosukee and the Seminole. We have the most diverse class of sort of political leadership, I would say, in the country. We're the home of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and Adelie Range and Alice Wainwright. So remarkable people and leaders worth getting to know as you join and build our community.
What would you say is, we spoke a bit of kind of the positive, what do you think are some of the challenges that some really great minds here and through Northeastern should help Miami, should kind of provoke Miami to really think about? Where do we need to invest time, effort, resources to ensure that Miami's continued kind of trajectory is as bright as the past decade has been?
We face some really stark challenges, starting with our geography. The ground beneath our feet is really porous, and we're landlocked, we're land constrained. We're lucky to be sandwiched between two national parks, Biscayne and Everglades, but it means that we're not getting any more land. And so we have to be a lot smarter about growth. The last 100 years of Miami's growth has been marked by sprawl, and it's only sort of in our lifetimes that we've really had some intentionality around what are the smartest policies, how can we create more transit-oriented development in a city that already exists. If you're reading the local newspaper, you surely have heard about our incinerator problem. This is a symptom of sort of our growth and the challenges ahead. I would respectfully submit, as someone who has spent a lot of her career in local government, that you can have an outsized impact on the air quality, water quality, quality of life generally. Our airport, our metro rail, all of it is controlled at the local level. Florida is unique in a lot of ways, but we're divided up into 67 different counties. Miami-Dade is one of them. Within Miami-Dade County, we have 34 municipalities, so it's a two-tier form of government. Madam Mayor Levine Cava is the county mayor, but there are 34 other mayors, just to make it extra confusing. And I think that these folks at the local level have a lot to do with how we address our mobility challenges, our affordability challenges, and making sure that we have high quality educational opportunities for everyone who grows up here.
I think that's spot on. I'm very much kind of molded and kind of shaped by the Knight Foundation tradition of local, of community, of informed and engaged as a way of sustaining and kind of improving democracy. Listen, I think we live in really uncertain times. We were joking around earlier with Diane that it's been a very long 40 days since the inauguration, just because the pace and the breadth of kind of what's coming out of DC is so different than what typically would happen. And so in those moments where business and or others may pause and say, I'm not sure what to do, right? There's a ton of opportunity at the hyper-local level. And I think that's where when Northeastern was coming to town and was thinking about campuses, I remember having the conversation with the team about where to settle, right? It was really important, I think, that Northeastern find a place that felt like Miami and was kind of at the crossroads of the city. Because getting immersed in Miami at the hyper-local level, I think, is the way you effectuate change here, right? There is, at times, I think, from the academy, this kind of holier-than-thou kind of approach that we're the academy, we know better, we're going to put out position papers and research, and you all down there figure out how to do it, and if it works. Northeastern's the opposite, right? Through the co-op model where they're putting kids in classrooms throughout, right? Not kids, young adults in classrooms, from classrooms into the workforce throughout your undergraduate experience to how it shows up. I think that's the superpower of Northeastern and Miami together right now. It's getting into the systems, getting into the weeds at the hyper-local level, because those challenges, man, like they need smart attention, they need smart efforts that reflect what the residents, what the community is willing to kind of fight for and do and build.
Absolutely. And I mean, the three pillars of our economy are still agriculture, real estate, and tourism, all of which create short-term, seasonal, low-paying jobs writ large. So there's a lot of interest and a lot of capital and a lot of innovation. And yet it remains true that most people in Miami are having trouble paying their bills. And I am heartened by the innovative examples like Atlantic Sapphire, one of the largest aquaculture companies. As a kid, I grew up here and I lived through Hurricane Andrew, which left an indelible mark on my life and the lives of those around me. I was going into 4th grade, but the scale and scope of that devastation both showed me the incredible resiliency of this community and also the vulnerability. Atlantic Sapphire enters the picture to create an agricultural model that is resistant to shocks and stressors. During my time in local government, our agricultural sector faced laurel wilt on our avocado trees, citrus canker, right? All of these things create existential challenges. And now with sort of a changing climate, we're going to see more and more of those. So brilliant thinkers like you can bring a lot of insight and innovation to what does sort of the next century of agriculture look like in the subtropical Miami? What is the next century of hospitality, real estate? What does it look like? These smart building innovations that are happening all around us that we hope to see more of.
When I was at Knight Foundation, had to love all the children equally, but that's utter bull. Miami is the place. And the thing about Miami that gives me a lot of hope that we can do that is that it's not yet baked, right? Sorry for folks who are like diehard Philly folks, you're like, Philly's really old, and that's really awesome. But it's also very different to effectuate change in Philadelphia than it is in Miami, because Miami is still very new. And so not only is it physically new, drive through downtown, there's like cranes everywhere, but no one here can tell you with a straight face that this is the Miami way, because like every 10 years, the Miami way has evolved and changed. And that's the opportunity that I see. It's that there's great minds that are willing to kind of show up and build something. And when somebody tells you, I don't believe in it, people still do it and they succeed. And that kind of paves the way for a whole new ethos.
I agree completely. And when Raul and I were talking about this, one of the things I love about living in Miami is that every other place I've lived, folks have said, well, you should have been in San Francisco 10 years ago, or New York 12 years ago, or whatever, wherever, London, or everyone in Miami is like, think about 5 years from now, guys. What's it going to be like in 10 years? That's kind of the feeling that we have in a really beautiful way. And there is so much to be proud of and hopeful for, but it's going to take a lot of a change in mentality about folks coming here. Alberto gave a great example. Someone lives here and comes to our symphony and then gives to the place where they grew up, right? The Cleveland Orchestra. We need Miamians who love and embrace Miami, even if this is just your part-time snowbird home. There's a lot of dynamism, but it's not going to be the fullest it can be without all of your investment.
Where would you say that if you had, if you were in charge of university and you had the opportunity to bring together a couple of institutions or a couple of people, right, by sector, where would you encourage a university or doers to kind of put some time? Do you think that the finance angle, right, is it? Do you think it's the intersection of the finance plus the AI? Like, where is it that Miami might have a competitive edge kind of from a sector perspective?
All of those things remain important. I met Mateo on the way in this morning, who is a professor who's doing work with semiconductors. Hello. So, I think the work that you're doing with electromagnetic engineering and semiconductors and collaboration potentially with some Central Florida institutions, all of it makes sense. We need all of the innovation. What I would say is, part of the role that universities can play and that civic leadership plays is holding our local government leaders accountable for making the best choices that are informed by data and research and not political expediency. And that is where your voices, right, not divorced from the community you're a part of, speaking up will really matter, right? Demanding the kind of innovation and the conditions that facilitate innovation, demanding investments in infrastructure that we've talked about to ensure that your investments here are wise and sustainable is where you can play the biggest role. And I trust that you'll find other spaces to innovate endlessly.
What's the insider's knowledge, right? You've been here essentially your entire life.
Yeah.
What's that one piece of insider's knowledge that you only tell the people you really like when they get here on how to navigate this place?
I met Daniela Levine Cava when I was 19 years old. I was her intern. And when I met her, I didn't know people like her lived in Miami. She reminded me of the best of my parents. Her spirit of belief in other people is infectious. And she frequently says to get to common ground, you go to higher ground. She's also fond of her civic superstar formula, which is that you get a daily dose of information, a weekly dose of volunteering, and a monthly dose of speaking up. I think all of those things are important. But my secret sauce is that, you have to be the person that says thank you, that follows up, that works hard. Because people in Miami are ready to embrace you and lift you up. It can be perceived as sort of a cliquish place, again, because we're a sprawled out community with 34 different neighborhoods, right? But it's easy to penetrate those silos, and you should. We need you to. And if you're someone who is interested in following up, you can meet with pillars of our community like Alberto Ibargüen, or our friend and mentor David Lawrence, or Madam Mayor Levine Cava, who calls herself a talent recruiter for world benefit. So that's my secret sauce. It's applicable anywhere, but I think it goes an extra long way in Miami because we are still becoming who we are.
Yeah, I love that. I would kind of add in, thank God you're no longer the director of building code compliance.
Thank God. Light a candle.
Because it'd be awkward now. I'd say don't follow the rules because half the buildings in Miami haven't been built to code or with permits. And it looks great. This place, for better and for worse, is permissionless, right? In other places, a social capital, a social hierarchy kind of have to be kind of obeyed or done in a linear way. And there's gatekeepers. Yeah, there's some gatekeeping in Miami, and folks who can kind of connect you to Adele's point about like the silos and the pockets. But like this place really is permissionless. It's like embrace that lack of structure in many ways. It is enabling and freeing. For some folks, it's terrifying. But in other ways, it's actually really freeing for builders, right? For entrepreneurs, for innovators, for free thinkers, because it's too young to have those kind of structures ossified yet. And that I think is my, for the people that come to town, I'm like, oh, I really want to keep this one. I hope this one stays. It's like, there are some rules, be aware of them maybe, but don't feel a deep sense of compulsion to obey them, because when you kind of go beyond what you're told is possible, some amazing things happen, including gold-plated mastodons.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. My husband he owns an art handling company, also a Miami kid who grew up in Hialeah, and he has a very personal story about being called to assemble that Damien Hirst piece, which was in pieces on the ground, which I'll tell you another time. But yes, Miami's remarkable. Support the arts.
Support the arts. Very good.
Faena is, living testament to how much the arts investment in this community has built our community and so many other places and institutions to explore. But
it absolutely is. I at the Partnership for Miami, as you heard, we work to improve our livability, which includes affordability and transit and mobility, and our educational systems. And what's been terrific about the past kind of few years is that having so many folks like Northeastern, like Citadel, come to South Florida has really forced us to look in the mirror. And when sometimes the challenges feel like insurmountable, like, oh, we're running out of land, there's no way we can be in a place that's affordable and socially mobile, economically mobile again, we're reminded that we've done hard things in the past, right? This place is really tenacious. This place has a lot of resilience, a lot of grit. Alberto says a lot, this is a place of choice, right? More than half of the folks that live in this city were not even born in the country. More than 2/3 weren't born here. Half weren't born in the country. They chose to be here. They went through really adverse circumstances, hardships to get here and do their thing. And so that resilience, that grit, you can't buy that, right? And that's what I think is of when I think of the challenge that we've got, I think of the arts. I think of we've done this. Like we have assembled a broad coalition of leaders from the business sector, from government, from civil society, often not liking each other, right? Often having very different tastes in what good art or a good museum could and should be. But knowing that if we kind of row in that same direction, magic will happen.
I agree completely. The first Art Basel that we hosted in Miami was actually meant to be just after September 11th and was canceled. It was the year I graduated high school, and my husband was actually an art handler for that one. And watching the rise of that, along with the rise of his own profession, is remarkable. I think we have other examples of that, and pandemic has been one of those transformational moments where we've seen so much interest, and to Alberto's point, worrying about sustaining it, but not so worried because folks want to stay and be a part of our community, which is wonderful.
All right, we got a few minutes left. Final parting thoughts on where Miami's trajectory kind of might be heading and how Northeastern in particular can help shape that.
I think if universities do more in general, not just Northeastern, but of deploying their brilliant minds for civic benefit, for community good, we'll be in a much better position. I grew up with academics, as I told you, and I was alarmed at how few of my parents' colleagues really ever read the Miami Herald or listened to WLRN. We have rich and great sources of information, and this community is worthwhile investing at least a little bit of time and energy. I know it sounds trite, but sort of getting engaged in voting, talking to your local officials will make a big impact, and I hope that you will all do that.
Yeah. I'll leave you with this, y'all. What's one of the particularly unique things about Northeastern is its global reach, right? At a time when higher ed is under a lot of pressure from different forces, economic ones, business model-wise being one of them, and you're seeing campuses and universities, particularly liberal arts colleges, kind of close in quick succession. Northeastern has grown, its enrollment has grown, its stature and its preeminence, and its footprint. I think that cities that win over the next several years are the cities that can attract and can responsibly and really effectively manage the flow of knowledge and flow of ideas. And so that you all have a global footprint, and that the Northeastern family knows that whether it's London or Boston or New York or out in California or Miami, they have a home, a hub to land, and that they can also succeed here. That's just, I think, one of your superpowers. And so I'd say lean heavily into this idea of Miami as just an extension of this global network and that flow of human capital and ideas, because I think that's where smart people want to be. They want to be with other smart people in really creative, fun places. And y'all, we're so grateful that y'all have chosen not just to be in Miami this time, but more permanently, because I think it's a good match of ethos and spirit and a good match of moment and opportunity.
Absolutely, and thank you for your time and invitation today.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Adele.
Thank you.